Hello, everybody. You're listening to About Buildings and Cities. I'm Luke Jones.
I'm George Gingell.
This is the second part of our conversation on Jože Plečnik in Ljubljana and the urban and civic architecture thereof.
We're going to talk about the projects along the river.
Yes, it's all about the river this time, and there's an awful lot of ground to cover in all of that. I think it's an interesting... So his first involvement with the river is basically kind of pragmatic, that they're embanking what was previously a sort of wild, uncontrolled river, that they were embanking and doing sort of civil engineering work to. A little bit like what they'd been doing in Vienna, I guess, a couple of decades earlier, which Otto Wagner had obviously worked on.
And slightly Plečnik.
Slightly Plečnik himself. And that's a bit of, you build up the banks and you kind of control the position of the banks. And there's also a little bit of kind of control of water using weirs and sluices and the like.
It's very handy when the city doesn't flood.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame in some ways. I feel like we went a bit far in London. I would like them to de-embank a few places.
The river was so wide that it had islands in it.
Yeah.
In the middle. They built ships on an island opposite the Tower of London. In the medieval period, I think.
Some of the lower quality bits of embankment I think they could get rid of because restore a little bit of the historic riverscape. Anyway, that's by the by. I think it's a thing that quite often happens in these architectural projects. They kind of get involved trying to do something quite straightforward and pragmatic, and then over time it grows into a great piece of art. And the people don't...
That doesn't always happen.
Yeah. But, you don't get hired to do something amazing on day one. But the commission sort of grows and becomes interesting. Thinking, when we're talking about Soane, the Bank of England don't think that what they want is what he ends up actually building for them. What they think is they need to get someone in to deal with the fact that the roofs are vulnerable to fire in the banking halls.
Yeah, and they had a position which was sort of an architect on site.
We need an in-house guy to deal with this kind of thing. But, often, the initiation of the project is often something like that. And it was in this case. And there are some bits of his work which are really, they're rather elegant. They're just bits of embankment.
This is what we're looking at here is, I think this is further up past the weir, either on the outskirts or kind of slightly beyond the city when it was first done.
Yeah.
And we can see the river. It's curving. There's an embankment, which has got a sort of big curb, and then a little terrace of stones, and then there's a park.
Yeah.
And along this way, I think there's a couple of, there's what to me felt like basically a picnic place with a big stone table.
Yeah.
And there's some bits with stairs. They probably would have been washing clothes in the river and things and going down to swim, I guess.
Good planting. Got some weeping willows. Yeah.
In the town that I grew up in, there was a place, a kind of concrete thing on the side of the river for people to swim in, and a place for people to wash clothes in the river that was built in the interwar period in the home counties, which seems almost unbelievable. There's various things to make the city more delightful.
It's very simple, well executed. Kind of further into town, the embankment has much more of a... Well, first of all, it's kind of connecting to the existing streets. It's creating a new walkway along the embankment. Also, the kind of embanking itself is quite... I don't know if I necessarily took the right photos when I was there.
Yeah, that's the place... The first photograph was quite interesting because that's where there wasn't a bridge.
Yeah.
You're looking at, it was originally a set of steps that went up different levels of the... the level. But yeah, there's a kind of promenade on one side and often both, all the way down the river that you suspect was probably... not there before. It was probably that the buildings fronted onto the muddy banks.
Yes, and then stairs going up to the kind of streets and squares beyond, and then he does do some bridges. There's also just lots of handrail, balustrade kind of design and a lot of nice stonework and which is all very delightful. And then there is also this is the Cobblers Bridge.
Yeah,
which we had a little detail of at the start of the last episode, which is a sort of it's a kind of like flat. I think this is all in concrete terrazzo. This is his kind of main material.
With a bridge like this, it is near to various things. I think you kind of on the right bank you come in off. There's a small sort of public square which is not kind of on axis to it, and then you're on the embankment, and then you go across it, and then there's a way into which you don't really see the kind of Baroque road that goes round, skirts around the bottom of the hill. It's an interesting choice of bridge. In one sense, it is a completely pragmatic sort of columns in the middle, and then it's a beam,
Yeah.
which I suspect is concrete, and a deck.
And I think this was there was an existing wooden bridge in this location, which I think this replaced.
That
I
would
think
make
is
sense.
Is the story.
The river is not enormously wide.
No, it's not a rushing torrent. At least not once it's been sort of sluiced and weird.
Yeah, I don't know what the seasonal variation is like, but
Yeah.
it's not a bridge it's not a river that's super hard to bridge.
Yeah.
Its, I guess, real main design feature of this bridge is that there are two different kinds of columns on it.
Yeah.
There's columns which float with a orb on top, and then there's lampposts, which are the kind of archaic ionic one with 3 lamps.
It's very nice. I guess this is in a sense like a kind of classic, well, a sort of neoclassic fantasy architecture trope, isn't it? You know, Palladio's got one, Soane did one, the bridge with columns on. You kind of have it in landscape gardens and things like that. But it's a bit strange because they're all freestanding columns, as if they were from a ruin or something.
All they're funny little monuments or something.
The fact that they're different heights as well is...
And the central ones, which come off the piers that support the bridge, are lower.
Despite feeling like they're on a wider spacing because they're halfway, whereas the others are on a narrower spacing but are taller. It's just a strange composition, but it's quite delightful.
It also, if you don't have those things, when you look down the river and when you're on the bridge, the space of the river seems open and the bridge seems exposed, and it kind of breaks that up, and it makes the views around it more wonderful. Well, now we're right to the other end of the river.
Now we're at the other end of the river. Yeah, we're kind of doing the ends towards the middle. So then this kind of quite late, I think this is a pretty late commission. What's the date of this one? Yeah, so this is from 1933 up until 1945 on this list, although I can't imagine that an enormous amount got done during the war. He did this sort of sluice down the other end, which is it's got a lot of flavour.
It does.
It's
So when we spoke about Otto Wagner's, he does a sluice as well.
Yeah.
In Vienna, much bigger one. And his approach felt like there was a big kind of engineering skeleton, and then he kind of put lines and things beside it.
Yes.
And it felt quite cool and quite steampunk.
Yeah.
This feels like a strange historical fantasy of something Ptolemaic Egypt builds a weir.
Yes, builds a 19th century weir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got these three sort of big piers, which have a little building at the top and then a kind of big stone base, one on either side of the river and one in the middle, so that you get the two sort of sluicy bits that can control the water flow. And each of them kind of facing downriver has a big archaic ionic thing, but with a face in the middle of it, which I think this is an Etruscan reference, I think.
Yeah,
although
they're sort of the tops of columns. Like there's a column that went way down into the ground.
They're like a very stumpy column. The whole thing is like a very stumpy colonnade, very stumpy and much too wide colonnade, which creates a sort of bridge between the three little buildings.
Yeah.
And then the top bits, they look like 19th century sort of Egyptian historicism. You get like this kind of style would be more at home in an urban penitentiary of the 19th century. You kind of get a lot of sort of Egyptian style.
They're funny. There's a lot of things that seem to be combining together.
Yeah.
In one sense, they seem like three sort of shrunken pylons.
Yeah.
You know, all they feel like a very tall base of an equestrian statue with a big cornice around the top.
Fourth plinth.
But very thin. But then when you look at it, it's got some nice windows in it.
Yeah.
And doors and things. And then it's convoluted in various ways. So at the top, it seems like a nice fourth plinth, except underneath the cornice, there's then some column capitals, which, I mean, all his stuff always fits and also seems weird at the same time.
Yes. They're capitals without columns.
And then, maybe for engineering reasons, this thing sort of steps out, is a lot wider at the base and kind of steps out once or twice. Depending on which way around you look at it, it seems to be different things in different places. And is it Egyptian? Is it Greek?
It's got a strongly...
Is it oddly Georgian?
Yeah, well, it's got a kind of strongly occult kind of feeling to it as well, doesn't it? I mean,
I have said he's eldritch.
Yeah, these are kind of these big faces, these kind of water spirits in the centres of the columns looking downriver, feel very magical, rather foreboding. It inspires a tiny bit of dread, this this structure, but in a very delightful way. And then, the more you look at it, the more peculiar and idiosyncratic the kind of use of the language is as well. The comparison with the Wagner one is obviously, like, Wagner is kind of interested in, he can't go all the way, but he's interested in, like, valorizing the kind of engineering, the cast iron, that kind of thing. Whereas this very much is about making it feel like something sort of timeless, massive, monumental.
It's an alternate reality, but it's not an alternate reality that's based on the rules that we have.
Yeah.
It's a funny little thing. I mean, bits of water management infrastructure, like the Thames Barrier is a funny thing.
Yeah.
When you come out to it in this sort of terminal place upriver, it's kind of like a bit far up the river for something. So they're kind of outposts.
Yeah, they're objects of wonder, like the sort of water management stuff. I think as I sort of kind of realise, having a young son, will occasionally kind of walk past a lock or a weir on the canal or something, and then have to spend a long time looking at it.
The waterfall is very amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, it does connect to. It's a bit like fire. They're sort of primal objects of wonder, and I think he kind of understands. He understands the attraction of that.
It's funny because it's not the Nile, this river. And
No.
this thing feels like it's...
It does feel like, yeah.
If you describe to someone badly ancient Egypt, perhaps to a Georgian,
You might end up somewhere here.
it's a very curious...
There's something which is like an enormous oil lamp made of bronze on the backside. Anyway, yeah, a very wonderful thing.
Kind of late to be doing that as well.
Yeah, so this is really getting right up towards the end of the Second World War.
The presentation drawings for this were drawn by Rabnica, who ends up being a kind of modernist architect. Very Plečnik infused.
Oh yeah, no, distinctly. I mean, completely. Very much more sort of post-war modernist.
Working
type
in
guy.
Yugoslavia, not the same.
But it's so that's a cool one. We've kind of been coming in from the ends because I wanted to end up in the middle, which is where there's this amazing concentration of Plečnik design in this middle section of the river. Yeah.
On a tributary, there's a little bridge.
Yeah.
Which is near his house.
Yeah.
And the play of that bridge is... I think it's got a church near it, which has got a sort of pointy bit, and it's got a very, very, very thin, tall, pointy pair of pyramids on it.
Yeah.
Which are like pyramid columns.
Yeah.
And it's smaller and more suburban in character. And the play is about the sort of picturesque play of these pyramid columns, I think, really.
Yeah.
Just to sort of say something about that one. And then, now we've got the design for some bridges.
Some bridges, and also the market, which are all part of a kind of ensemble. His most famous bridge is the Triple Bridge. And we should just locate this. So when we talked about the form of Ljubljana, the river does a kind of 90-degree angle, and the Triple Bridge is more or less at the corner. It's more or less at that point where the river kind of turns the corner. There was an existing bridge there,
which is the middle bit of the Triple Bridge.
Although he's kind of redressed the top of it. I think that the brief was to expand it a bit, and he chooses to do that with these two arms which are separated off it, rather than kind of just expanding out sideways.
He builds two additional bridges.
Yeah. So turning it into so that it's kind of splaying out. They're kind of like segments of the curve of the river in a sense. It means that it means all kinds of things. They're pointing towards this square. And
it means that they sort of square, but it is also sort of just a
big junction.
It's kind of a place, where a number of roads, a number of paths coincide. The kind of path going along the river, and then there is one that kind of goes over the bridge up to the castle, or the foot of the castle through that route.
And there's another one coming down.
Whereas Congress Square is like a big square that is a square on itself.
Yeah.
This is more like an intersection.
Yeah, it's an intersection. But it means that the bridge sort of addresses the whole of it. And it does a lot more besides. It also has these staircases which go down. I think they've actually got public toilets in now. There's a kind of lower space within the embankment.
I remember it being very, very, these banisters, these
Yeah.
bollard, these yeah, this is the view that I sort of remember.
It's layering, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's layering and layering of all of these kind of walkways behind walkways, and yeah, all of the banisters, and people kind of walking to and fro. It feels like you're looking across a sort of strange field.
And obviously there are
bridges.
funny lamps
There are funny little lamps. Yeah.
with urns.
Yes. Yeah. This is all.
But
all
whereas the
terrazzo.
others are on a little, are on sort of little tight things going over the river, this is in a really public central place.
Yeah.
And he's dressed the area around it quite a lot as well. So you've got that public intersection.
Yeah.
This is also creating an obvious route, I think, further up that goes down and looks up at the castle.
Yeah.
And then on either side of the river, looking up, there's a pavilion, a kind of classical pavilion. A
Yeah.
small one on the north bank, which is
Yeah.
the tobacconist.
There's
And
a shop for smokes and one for flowers.
Yep. Oh, I mean, originally, I don't know what they are now, but
Yeah. Well, the flower shop's still got flowers in.
that's nice.
They're not selling. They
They haven't authentically kept selling
yes,
cigarettes.
vapes.
Yeah, I'm sure that would.
Should be. Yeah. It was never open when I was there. I'm not sure anyone's in it. Yeah, they're really tiny little little kind of
particularly-
mini temple spaces.
Particularly the tobacconist is very
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
It's almost as small as you could do a temple. It's got a flat roof,
Yeah.
2 square columns with a sort of abstract fluting.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it kind of aeolic or something, but I would say it's probably in the Plečnik order.
Yeah.
And then a white box with a door, and it's a kiosk
Yeah.
of some sort. It feels very Plečnik to me. It's something which only really makes sense when as it sort of ties together its urban context.
Yeah. It's such a tiny little thing. Yeah.
It doesn't look that amazing on its own.
No,
but
the one across the river is there's a bit more going on. This kind of big.
It's got a lot going on, I would say.
It's got a lot going on. It's a much bigger. It's kind of brick box kind of temple. It's got a kind of temple front with a sort of pediment on 2 columns, but then it's got a smaller one nested inside with two different orders. It's got sort of Corinthian ones on the bigger one, and then the inner one is this extremely peculiar, super kind of imaginative, like archaic Ionic one with like mega owl eyes, but which are sort of sticking out like, I don't know, it looks like a sort
those like licorice bootlace things that
Yeah.
like a spiral.
Yeah, it looks like
stuck them on the 4 corners.
Yeah, it's so peculiar, and again, like this is all artificial stone. Yeah, so that one is still a working flower shop.
And looking down, they are this sort of funny pair,
Yeah,
very unbalanced and asymmetric.
yeah,
The bridge is picturesque and controlling, but obviously, it's splaying
yeah,
and not in a symmetrical way. 3 bridges, which
Yeah.
are nonetheless sort of the same, in quite an open point. So you've got a lot of things where everything has a kind of pair,
yeah,
but the pairs are not the same. They're doing very different things. The tobacconist kiosk is kind of there to be a mirror, and also, I think, to stop that corner being too open, because the embankment's quite wide there, and there's kind of,
Yeah.
I remember cafes and
just to
things.
create a little pinch point, which then kind of opens up again into the embankment on that side.
But the florist temple is the start of this incredibly long market,
Yeah,
which gets narrower and narrower and narrower,
yeah.
and then becomes a florist pavilion.
We'll talk about the market in a second, but yeah, these are all kind of stitched together. Yeah, you can see the original bridge, which was sort of conventional big arched bridge underneath.
The way it functioned then and now, essentially, is what you do is you have the middle is a road,
Yeah,
vehicle road,
Yeah.
and then the 2 sides are the pavements on either side.
nowadays you also have a bit of pavement on the road bit as well. It's this like for this white. It's like a white marble terrazzo, like grey cement terrazzo. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not polished, is it? It's just sort of stuck on.
It's kind of, I think it might be like a little bit washed, or it may be like incompletely polished or something,
Yeah.
like a very rough polish or something like that. So yeah, it's a funny materiality. It's something that you feel like you might see next to an outdoor swimming pool of a certain vintage. Or yeah, it's a funny material. You don't really read it from far away because
Yeah.
it's talking the language of classicism. And it's quite it's quite nice. It's very tactile.
It's interesting. This bridge is it's fairly outrageous to go, we want to make this, we're just going to make another two. Actually, I found the little bits walking down the river with the strange columns kind of more wonderful.
Yeah.
In terms of the bridges themselves.
I think what's nice, and I guess what is sort of humane about it, is that it turns all of this everyday activity into a bit of a spectacle. You know, all the people moving backwards and walking backwards and forwards, going here and there, the cars going here and there. Like it makes you sort of strangely, everything becomes a sort of strange performance. You're sort of strangely aware of, because it's all broken up and it's within these little lanes,
and it's quite fun having places to look down into.
Yeah, that's nice as well. Yeah, the little views down into, there are these sort of strange little spaces. I don't know actually what these little inhabited spaces underneath are. I think there are some toilets under there somewhere, but I don't know what not all of them look like they're in terribly active use. And there are now some little trees growing up through the holes. It's very good.
It's difficult to describe how it fits in with its context.
Yeah, it's the kind of orientation to the river is important, and it sort of makes sense if you look at it on the plan, because the river is on a bend. It kind of means that more of the city around is kind of being addressed by the axis of the castle as well.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things that a lot of the bridges are doing is where you've got where the space of the river could be open and kind of dissipate energy. It puts a lot of junctions and points of things to look at the space of the turn. Yeah, it kind of animates the middle ground a lot.
Yeah.
By having these variations of things. And then he's sort of surrounding that with various other bits of things to look at. So where you could have a point where I guess it might lose its energy a bit from being open. It doesn't do that at all. It's very busy and dense.
This was built in end of the 1920s to 1929 to 32 or something like that.
I cannot think of a comparator.
No. So yeah, the Cobblers Bridge and the sluice that we talked about are both a bit later than this. This was the kind of the first of those big...
yeah, I mean, if you're going to do anywhere, this is the obvious central point.
Yeah.
I don't feel it's sort of this absolute centre of the city, but it's the centre of the kind of energy.
It all now is part of a sort of ensemble with his market, which then stretches down, runs right down the river's edge for a long way, like sort of more than 200 metres, I think, all the way down along the river, but which was created later. The market was built at the end of the 30s.
But I think there'd been there was clearly a big block of land.
Yeah.
There are some buildings that were permanently there, some which are still there, but this was clearly a big site for development.
Yeah, there is some kind of important historic stuff there. There's the big cathedral. So this is a bit of land to sort of east of the Triple Bridge, where the river is kind of has turned the corner, is sort of heading straight. And yeah, there's the cathedral. There's some sort of Baroque buildings. There's the big market square. There's also a smaller square. And yeah, he'd obviously been working on various schemes. I mean, I think his way of sort of... He had different ways of working on these things. I think that one of the things that he did actually was also that he would just get students to study things that he was interested in, kind of urban questions that he was interested in as their sort of thesis project. So there are various schemes for the redevelopment of this area which were done by his students. It's not like nowadays where we let them design their own student projects. I think a lot of the projects that his students did were sort of designed by him as well, or kind of sketched by him, and they would figure out the details. There are various schemes which we'll look at in a minute for what to do with this area and how to kind of develop it and realise it. And I think the market is a sort of relatively late intervention
and greatly scaled back.
Yeah.
So the earlier schemes are really how to completely redevelop this area, keeping a couple of bits, but putting a number of big sort of proposals for the town hall and other things in there, to a series of big buildings. Worked over, and they don't want to do that. And then he ends up with this thing which is interesting and different.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's a bit of one of the schemes. It's still quite grandiose and particular.
Yeah, so it's a market it's a sort of meat and fish market. and there's a meat bit, originally a sort of meat bit on top and a fish bit underneath.
Or at least that's what they
But-
say. I mean, I'm not sure. So, he's an amazing architect. I'm not sure he really gets retail or really cares.
Yes.
This feels really convincingly civic, but
Yeah.
it doesn't feel convincingly commercial
Okay.
to me.
Okay, there's the criticism.
Well, I don't think that's really a criticism.
Yeah.
If you were to show me a picture of it in general and say, what is this? Well, it's clearly something. So the building is one side's the river.
Yeah.
It's very long and thin and curves around with it.
Yeah.
The other side is a succession of things. It's kind of a way.
Yeah.
And it starts with the florist pavilion, and then there's a kind of
There's a bit.
colonnade,
There's a colonnade. Yeah.
and then it gets wider.
It's mostly kind of colonnade on the side facing into the city, but
But
with
it's-
different sorts of treatments.
At the beginning, it's just open. It doesn't have
At the
any-
moment, it's a kind of open colonnade. At the beginning, it's a sort of open colonnade, and then there are bits with these little shops behind with a colonnade in front, and then it's interrupted by a few openings. Well, one complete opening, and then these two sort of porticos, which are open all the way through, and where you can kind of get close to the river, because otherwise, across most of its length, it's like dropping straight into the river, and it's a wall with rubbly stone bottom bit with little windows, and sort of stucco upper bit with big arched windows.
There's a couple of stairs that go down to
There's a
a
stair.
lower circulation. I
Yeah.
never went down into the bottom bit. I think
Ah.
it may have been closed.
Yeah. So there's a stair. So I'm just showing the plan, but this bit actually leaves off the kind of open colonnade, which is at the end. They're like there's a long string of these little sort of squarish shops, which sometimes are doubled up,
Which have
with a little colonnade
A
in
kind
front
of
of it.
small arched window and door to go into it.
Yeah.
But they're not like really open like shop fronts.
Yeah. No, yeah, the arched door is a bit of a well, it's a kind of like a Palladian motif almost,
Yeah.
but executed in quite strange. The materials are alpine rustic,
Yeah.
like
I
sort
mean,
of
I might be making it sound more closed than it is. There's a lot of.
but it's a really shallow building. You can't understress how long and thin this building is. Over its length, the proportion is something like 1:30. It's like a really, really shallow building, which is enormously long.
And it curves. So you've got
Yeah.
this really long view, and it goes through the triple bridge,
Yeah,
a tight passage,
Yeah.
a little square,
Yeah.
another tight bit, the big market square, and then off slightly the end.
I mean, just to talk about the relationship to the context, I think it does something very sophisticated in the way that it addresses that string of different little spaces. So that there's the sort of tight street next to the triple bridge where it's a sort of open colonnade with nothing behind it, which kind of creates a sort of spaciousness under there. And then it's kind of broken down so that in the big market square, it reads as sort of two equal colonnades with something in the middle. And then in the little square, because of the way it's subdivided, again, it reads as like a big, nice sort of centralized colonnade. It's sort of laid out in a way that for each of those spaces, it feels like there's something very well proportioned and sort of fitted to it. But it's also sort of laid out. He's worked out like a very, very clever like subdivision basically of the bits. Basically because there are these sort of two wings which are slightly different lengths. And then each one has a sort of portico in the middle, and then there's also a gap.
Which originally was going to have Butcher's Bridge, which was going to have
Another bridge, yeah.
a bridge with lots of columns on it.
There was originally meant to be a bridge in the middle, which was sort of like a hovering sort of Parthenon, kind of was the way it looked.
So 4x6 grid of columns.
Yeah.
It's like a public space on the bridge,
Yeah.
not just a route.
Yeah, so it's like one wing addresses the big square, and then half of one wing addresses the little square. And then the little open colonnade off the end addresses the street, and then that bit is kind of the leftover bit is covered by a block. It's kind of simple, but it would be easy not to do it as well as that. It's
How does the lower bit work?
so there is a staircase down. So I think this is part of this bit off the end, this sort of open colonnade, which is closest to the triple bridge. I think is a slightly later bit of development, and there is a staircase which goes down, which is expressed. I mean, which is a crazy,
more cool.
it's a crazy
strange
element.
Things, yeah.
There's this crazy, like, big projecting sort of turret coming out the side.
Does it have strange asymmetric details?
Yes. Does it? Does it? Yes.
Weird
Does it have
concrete
urns propping something up?
Yeah. Yeah, does.
And it's got the big, amazing spiral staircase going down in kind of grey terrazzo again. I mean, this is this.
Does it have strange columns going nowhere?
We did a little exercise of counting how many different columns you can see from one place here, and there are something like 6 different columns of sizes ranging between about 40 centimeters high and about 6 meters high.
What do students make of this?
They liked it
Because it is. It's
they
not.
liked it.
It's very striking. It's not very contemporary.
Yeah, they liked it. They were into it. Why wouldn't you? It's got his favourite thing of getting rid of the handrail and just unhelpfully having a bunch of columns without
Where you wish you put the handrail on.
without any handrail on top, which are marching up the sort of inside of the spiral stair. There's a tiny column which is concealed. There's this kind of weird, like, kind of hollow, which kind of looks out into these windows out there, but which is kind of spaced away from you. I don't know what that space is meant to be for. And then actually the centre post of the spiral staircase is a huge column as well. So
Yeah. Does anyone manage to sell anything in that lower bit?
there were some people who seemed to be buying fish down there. There was a bit of commerce going on. I thought that actually the shops upstairs looked a bit quiet to me. Possibly they have the wrong tenants. Like, I'm not sure they work terribly well as shops.
No, it doesn't.
I think
it's
like
not,
slightly
it
vibey
doesn't-
little bars.
It is extremely well executed bit of architecture for doing architecture things. Looks great.
Yeah.
Knits together the city really well.
Yeah.
But the fact that this sculptural form is notionally made of shops, which I'm sure, and there are shops, and I can see them working, and I'm sure people do buy things in them, but it doesn't feel like lively commerce, does it?
No.
Or it feels something that's actually quite suppressing of.
Yeah.
If it does work, it must be sort of powered by the status of this object.
Yeah. And then it's kind of materially and at the level of language, it is this sort of funny fusion. It feels the materiality, you've got kind of nice brown wood windows, little white curtains, grey, quite rustic, irregular stone, and then kind of white stucco. This feels like it's leaning very into a sort of Alpine, Slavic, rustic idiom. But then
the first bit of the idiom is so obviously Greek.
The colonnade itself is a stoa.
Yeah.
And this thing of an enormously long stoa is a Greek thing.
It's an enormously long colonnaded thing with cells off it on squares.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, it's on multiple squares, which is a bit unusual.
Yeah.
It's kind of on 3. But it's definitely playing with a type.
I mean, the whole elevation is chock full of ideas. Absolutely. The guy did an awful lot of designing. And then, yes, there's this unrealised bit, which is the so-called Butcher's Bridge, which was to be this kind of central element, a big bridge going across the river. There's quite a change in elevation between the two sides of the river at this point, so it would have had a lot of stairs on the other side. Yeah, it's this grid of columns with arches.
Well, sort of vaults.
Yeah, vaults.
Green vaults.
Yeah, it feels like like a kind of Mannerist, sort of Renaissance or Mannerist kind of thing.
Bit of a thick. In this elevation, it looks quite sort of slight, but if you rotated it 30 degrees and did the elevation rotate, you'd see a lot of columns and a lot of...
The language is like Bramante or something, isn't it? What's the... Yeah. But then totally sort of surreal location. And then, I don't know, I think there's something about the gesture of doing something so grandiose and then filling it with people selling sausages that I kind of love as well. There's something lovely about that.
Well, it's a complete and utter lack of compromising towards... Nowadays, people are encouraged to think a little bit about what goes on in the building and how it might be... how the building might accommodate itself, the design of the building might accommodate itself somewhat to its use. This does not care.
It doesn't do that. All the better for it as well.
And so what it is a bit of
Yeah.
it's a bit of city, bit of ideal city in a way that will be inhabited by
People selling
things.
kidneys and no, I think it would have been lovely. But
Exactly how they were meant to do that. Well, that's their problem.
Yeah, it would have been good. There's
This render does not have the people on it.
Yeah, so there's a book which does. There was a project a few years ago where people did computer models of various of his unrealized designs, which I think they are quite useful in some ways. But yes, this render should have a lot more. It's got chaps in anoraks standing around, whereas what it needs is tables full of blood sausage.
Yeah, I mean, I heard as well that it was for butcher's stalls. It almost seems unbelievable, though, because I just cannot see how you could do it. I mean, it would literally be like you built this incredibly elaborate thing, and the way of doing a stall in it is you just get some trestle tables and
Yeah, that'd be all right.
plonk your products on them.
That'd be all right.
It would be fine. It's a funny thing to build.
Yes.
It's also the sort of energy of the city is not... This isn't the commercial centre. I mean, there is a big market on the square opposite, I suppose.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there's lots of stalls. And it seems like a pretty lively market.
It was definitely kind of persimmon season when I was there.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And then, yes, but I mean, this whole area, as we said, he had bigger plans for it at different times. And I think we're probably, like, this whole series of kind of conjectural sort of projects on its own is super complicated, and I feel like we will get some bits wrong. So I think we're just going to talk about sort of fragments of it. I don't think we can kind of effectively tell the whole story of it because I think it's too complicated.
It would be more or less a PhD, I think.
Yeah. It's
to really get through all the variations.
Yeah. They're really interesting proposals, though. So in these proposals, which are for the reconstruction of this area of town around the old cathedral, and which particularly focuses on creating a new town hall and new kind of buildings for the civic administration. He's really, really channeling themes from Camillo Zitta and themes from the kind of study of like historic, particularly Italian city squares, but kind of just doing stuff that you don't see anywhere else, really.
There is another place you sort of see it. You see some of it in his work in Prague Castle.
A little bit, yeah.
And then it's kind of like a Slovenian take on like Novecento.
Yeah,
sorry.
Novecento, yeah.
Yeah,
you see a little bit of it in Italy in some of the problematic architects of the interwar Italian period. I think that there's a little bit of this around. There's a whole series of these schemes, I think some of which are basically him and his students working on stuff that they're interested on. I think some of which are actually for the city, which are kind of more, closer or further away from being able to be built. The cathedral stays where it is. The cathedral is sort of parallel to the river. Its entrance is, its kind of main axis is running parallel to the river, and in its kind of existing configuration, the side of it can be seen from the smaller square, and it's not really visible from the larger market square, which bridges between the kind of river embankment and this road, which is kind of running parallel to the river a little bit towards the castle. What Plečnik generally wants to create is a kind of long square whose long axis runs parallel to the river. So in contrast to what's there at the moment, where the squares are kind of running down to the river, it's something which is sort of separated from it, and where you would kind of reach the river through going through a sort of colonnade under the buildings. He has this kind of three sides of a square which kind of continues the line of the cathedral and creates a sort of enclosure around the big square. It reminds me a lot of St. Mark's for some reason. That feels like it's a kind of a reference, that it's another very big long square with a sort of colonnade around it. The lagoon is kind of there, but it's sort of round the corner. It's not something which you kind of see from the main body of the square.
Yeah, all the procuries, I guess. Yeah. That bit where it's this repeated narrow...
Yeah.
I mean, looking at this model in particular, it does feel almost like something that Brasini or one of those guys could do. I think if you then put his detailing on it, it would perhaps stop looking quite so much like that.
Yeah. And the square itself, I mean, in this version, it's got various
Massive obelisks.
bits of monumental architecture.
Check.
There's a sort of kind of
Carver
format thing there. Okay.
Check.
I haven't made sense of what all of the different versions are.
Every time you see a plan,
It's different.
it's a different thing as the elevation, as the model, because there were so many iterations, I think.
I think a consistent thing is that there's at this kind of corner, so the kind of far corner from the cathedral, there was going to be a big town hall, and so there's a kind of axis between this big road which the cathedral is on, which is parallel to the river, and a road that comes over another bridge, and they kind of meet there. And at that intersection, he was going to put a big town hall. I mean, I've seen a bunch of different elevations for it. They're really
It's pretty cool. Pretty weird.
cool.
Why don't you describe it?
It's like big rustic stonework, big box rustic stonework, lots and lots of windows of different sizes which are sort of scattered on the facade.
Not quite like you got a
Yeah.
pack of laser cut windows and threw them at it, but
And then it's got a kind of a couple of arched openings, and then there's sort of another one over on the corner, a place to deliver political addresses from or something, a sort of high-level balcony thing.
a lot of asymmetry.
Yeah. At the top, it's got this band, which is like a kind of mini dwarf colonnade all the way across. And it's also got something which looks like a very like Renaissance Belvedere. Little arches, little columns.
And then the other side.
And then, is this the other side? I mean,
Yep.
This elevation is a bit like if you took the facade of King's Cross Station, and then if you filled in the openings with like Byzantine... kind of Byzantine infill or something. There's like two huge arches, and then they've got three little. It's sort of broken down within those big arches into little arched openings, a kind of banding colonnade, Belvedere thing, and then something at the top which looks like like a I don't know, is that sort of
I don't think
something?
he's done very good like line weight control on this to let people know if that's a window or a brick flat thing or.
Oh, there's a sort of a grid of tiny windows. What's that about? I mean, this is a pretty extraordinary set of elevations. He's gone very dense on the language.
Also we don't quite know what the provenance of these particular set of drawings.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Is.
Someone's
going to go. I wasn't by him at all. This is.
I don't know. Essentially, we've got a bunch of books of like varying qualities, and I've scanned in all of the pictures that I like best. And then I think that one on the bottom was meant to be the city planning department. He was going to build an absolutely grandiose, like city architects department, which looks absolutely enormous, and which has.
They really could get away with these amazingly ornate buildings with very little program in them, very little like usable space, couldn't they? Yeah,
and that has an enormous colonnade at ground level, and above it's a kind of Majolica house, kind of flat decorative facade look to it. So along the river, there's like a very, very long. I mean, this is what's interesting about it. Yeah, he wants to create this very, very long block.
What if you made the market, but you made it 4 stories tall?
Which would have sat kind of in front of where the market is now. And there is like a sort of a colonnade and a route through there. But he really wants to separate this square from the river.
And everything, actually. Yeah. It's more like the courtyard in a castle sort of square. It is open at one end a little bit, but it's very walled off from the river, the roads. Yeah. It's in the middle. And it's got some monuments in it. Yeah. So it's an enclosed square that's reaching towards being a courtyard, but a large, big one.
Yeah, here we've got this characteristic manoeuvre where you can see that's going to be the main route through over what would have been the Butcher's Bridge. And he's put an enormous column monument right in front of it.
Is it right in front of it? It's right to the side?
I think you would definitely walk around it through. I'm not sure if it's centred or if it's just very Plečnik.
Funny.
Yeah.
I mean, this would have been quite cool.
It would have been great. It's such a singular vision, yeah.
Okay, so that's a model of what that end is. All open windows. I can see how they couldn't quite. It's a lot of grand public space. It's another one of these, a lot of grand public space to building.
Yeah.
It's not quite Admiralty Arch level of, okay, so you get 2 small offices for an enormous Baroque. I would definitely have gone and visited it.
The reconstructions, for the 3D reconstructions are very helpful here because the elevations are otherwise quite hard to unpick. Do we want to do one last bit, or do we want to have a break there, do you think?
Well, let's just do a teaser.
Yeah.
And that is that a bit further down from this square, he did actually get to build a kind of something which has got a kind of little bit of the language, or at least was meant to be an intervention sort of as a kind of outcast of this great planning department, town hall, urban space on arcades, which was a house for the family of the urban planner, which is very curious and slightly in this language, and we will talk about in the next episode.
Yes. It's worth saying we will try and put some of this stuff up on the socials. These images, are really worth having a look at. I'm sure you'll spot all kinds of things in them that we've missed. There is a lot to notice.
So the next one we will presumably deal with the Flatiron Building, the National Library, which is pretty good, and the proposals for the Parliament for the Hill, of which there were a series, and he didn't get to do very much. Yeah.
The other great...
and then some of the projects he did after the war, including the conversion of the Templar monastery.
Yeah, we will do that.
So we will have at the end the megalomaniac project and the kind of beautiful, sensitive, executed intervention.
Compromise and no compromise. Kind of versions of the same thing.
Like, not for the first time, the compromised one does seem nicer than the uncompromised. Sometimes. Maybe we'll come to a different conclusion.
Yes. And hopefully we can sum up some things we've learned from him as well. Great. Well, thank you very much for listening. As I've said, you can find links to all sorts of things, including our Patreon, on our website, which is
Thank you very much, patrons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, long-suffering patrons. We will hopefully be recording a bit more.
Yes. So the website is aboutbuildingsandcities.org. Thanks a lot to Matt for editing the show.
Thank you very much, Matt.
You're doing a very good job, Matt.
All I can say is we're always sorry. I at least am always sorry.
You're doing a very good job. And yes, we'll look forward to speaking to you again on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.